Great. Thank you, Alex. And good afternoon. I am Angela Sierra. I am a co-chair of the Racial and Identity Profiling Advisory Board, or as we call it, RIPA. Today is April 23rd, 2026. It's 12:03 p.m. and I'd like to call the RIPA board meeting to order. I too want to welcome all our board members that are here with us today. I want to welcome all members of the public who are here with us, and also welcome all our DOJ staff that so ably assist the board in the important work that we do. So welcome to you all. Today we have a full agenda. As Alex noted, this is our first full board meeting for this calendar year. And it's our first meeting since we issued our report, our last report, in January or on January 30th, 2026. That was our 9th annual report issued by this board. Since then, and since the beginning of this year, we as a board have been very productive. All our subcommittees have met. And as we will be seeing today, a lot of work has already been done in brainstorming, thinking through issues, outlining potential issues for our board's consideration and discussion as a whole today. So before we move on to the substantive parts of our agenda, I'll turn it over to our co-chair, Andrea Guerrero, for her introduction, and then we will pass it on to all of our board members so that you can introduce yourself. But just again, quickly, I'm Angela Sierra. I'm an attorney with the California Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Enforcement Section, and I'm the Attorney General Rob Bonta's designee on our board. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrea, our co-chair, and then she'll turn it over to the rest of you for your introductions. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andrea Guerrero, and I am the Executive Director at Alliance San Diego, and I am an appointee of the Senate President Pro Tem. It's good to be here, and I will pass it to Board Member John Dobard.
Good morning, John Dobard with Catalyst California, and an appointee of Speaker Emeritus Anthony Brendan. And I will pass it to Board Member Chauncey Smith.
Thank you, John. Good morning, good afternoon, actually, it's noon. Good afternoon, everyone. Chauncey Smith, I'm an Associate Director at Catalyst California, and I'm an appointee of Attorney General Rob Bonta. I will pass it to Board Member Ford.
Good morning, you all. Lead pastor at 16th Street, Seventh-day Adventist Church in San Bernardino. Sorry, I'm getting feedback. I'm not sure if you all are.
We're getting a little bit of, we're getting a little bit of interference there.
Yeah, not sure.
Make sure everybody turns off their mic.
Try to turn off. Not sure if that helps. But anyway, I'm lead pastor at 16th Street, Seventh-day Adventist Church. I'm appointee of Rob Bonta. Pass it over to
Let's see, we can pass it on to Rich Randolph.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? There's no echo?
Yes. No,
good afternoon to everyone. Happy to be all here, see all of you today. Rich Randolph, I'm an appointee of PORAC, representing Peace Officer Research and of State of California. And I'm also police chief here at Fontana School Police. Good to see all of you. And I'd like to pass it on to Chief Talese.
Oh, good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see everyone once again. Sean Talese on behalf of the California Police Chiefs Association. And I'm working off my phone, so I apologize that I can't really see who to pass it off to. So if somebody could help me there.
Sure. Why don't we pass it on to Jordan Rawl?
Hi, my name is Jordan Rawl. I'm a junior at Eleanor Roosevelt High School, and I was appointed by Rob Bonta.
Great. Thank you. And now let me pass it on to Captain Alatorre.
Hey, good morning or good afternoon. Captain Jose Alatorre, representing the California Highway Patrol.
Let's see, why don't we pass it on to, how about Lily Kajabi?
Hi there. I hope you can hear me okay. I
Yes.
just want to say I'm on a different device and I was able to hear by phone the introduction. Thank you to our fearless chairs for launching us today. My name is Lily Kajabi. I'm a professor of mathematics in Los Angeles at Loyola Marymount University and an appointee of the Attorney General's office. And I'm afraid because I didn't have video earlier, I'm not sure I'm seeing all the board members. So can I ask whomever's here if there's a board member who hasn't introduced themselves?
Sure. Why don't we pass it to Amina Kazi?
Afternoon, everyone. Amina Kazi. I'm an Orange County-based civil rights attorney. I'm just glad to be here for our first full board meeting of the year.
Let's see, and we have, let's see who else is here. I believe it is, do we have Pastor Kreiner?
Good afternoon, everyone. Pastor Kreiner, DJ Kreiner, Fresno, California, St. Rest Baptist Church, Planning Commissioner for the City of Fresno, appointed by Rob Bonta, Attorney General Rob Bonta.
Great, thank you. Let's see, Alex, do we have everybody? Is there anybody remaining who hasn't introduced themselves?
Thank you, Co-Chair Sierra. I think that is everybody who's on the call today.
Terrific. Well, thank you. Okay, so we can move on to our third agenda item, which is the approval of our November 18, 2025 full board meeting minutes. So why don't we all just take a moment to, if any folks want to pull those back up and take a last minute or last look at those, and then we can open up to a motion for approval of those minutes. And if anybody sees anything they would like to discuss or that they think needs modification, otherwise we can entertain a motion. Okay. Okay, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes from any of our board members? Okay.
I can move to approve the minutes.
Terrific. And do we hear a second?
I'll second.
Wonderful. Okay, so if our DOJ staff could take a roll call.
Motion on the floor to approve the November 18, 2025 full board meeting minutes. Board Member Alatorre.
I will abstain from voting as I wasn't present at that meeting.
Alatorre abstain. Board Member Kreiner. Board Member Kreiner, come back. Board
I
Member Dilbar.
apologize. Yes.
Okay, Board Member Kreiner, aye. Board Member Dilbar.
I was absent from that meeting and will abstain.
Dilbar abstain. Board Member Ford.
Hopefully you can hear me. Yay.
Ford, aye. Co-Chair Guerrero.
Aye.
Guerrero, aye. Board Member Kajabi.
Aye.
Kajabi, aye. Board Member Kazi.
Aye.
Kazi, aye. Board Member Rawl.
Aye.
Rawl, aye. Board Member Randolph.
Aye.
Randolph, aye. Co-Chair Sierra.
Aye.
Sierra, aye. Board Member Smith.
Aye.
Smith, aye. Board Member Solis.
Aye.
Solis, aye. That motion carries with 10 ayes and 2 abstentions.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is our reports from each of our 4 subcommittees. We've allotted 20 minutes for those collectively. So why don't we start with the report from the Accountability and Civilian Complaints Subcommittee.
Good morning, everyone. DJ Kreiner. I will be reading the Accountability and Civilian Complaint report for April the 23rd, 2026 for our RIPA board meeting. I do serve as the co-chair and our meeting took place March the 24th, 2026. The DOJ did notify the subcommittee members that co-chair member Hawkins will be transitioning out of her co-chair position, but the beauty is that she'll be remaining as a subcommittee member. This means that there is an opening for a co-chair position for the Accounts and Civilian Complaints Subcommittee. And at the next subcommittee meeting, we as members will have the opportunity to nominate either someone or ourselves individually to be elected into that role as co-chair to be able to serve with me for the remainder of that time as co-chair for our subcommittee. During the meeting, the DOJ also facilitated discussion regarding topics for the Accountability and Civilian Complaint sections of the year's RIPA report. The civilian complaint topic proposals are as follows. The DOJ facilitated discussion on the following topics for the inclusion in the civilian complaint chapter for this year's report. The analysis of the RIPA complaint data. One issue raised by the board in the subcommittee in last year's report is the low sustained rate for racial and identity bias complaints. The board expressed the desire to explore the cause of the low rate of sustained complaints in future reports. In response to this issue, this year's report could look more closely at the RIPA data to provide more context for low number of sustained complaints. The report could provide some context for the data on the low number of sustained findings using summary statistics, and could also examine the overall complaint dispositions of the profiling complaints and dispositions by types of profiling allegations broke down by agency over time. However, the DOJ did explain that there are limitations on how this analysis could be generated, since the RIPA complaint data is summary data, and it may be difficult to draw any meaningful conclusions about sustained complaints from a more detailed analysis. The best practices for a complaint investigation process. Another topic for the subcommittee could address is the issue of low number of sustained complaints by conducting research into best practices for investigation of racial and identity bias complaints, both in law enforcement and in other contexts, to try to understand where there may be gaps in law enforcement complaint investigation process. For the civilian complaint section, the subcommittee decided to focus on looking at law enforcement agency and investigatory techniques and propose best practices for racial and identity bias complaint investigations to address any possible issues leading to low number of sustained complaints. As part of this focus, the subcommittee did raise the possibility of having a representative from law enforcement agency come and talk to our subcommittee in our subcommittee meetings at some point about how the agency conducts these types of complaint investigation and how they interpret the threshold they need to meet to sustain a complaint. The subcommittee did agree that it would be interested in qualitative data over quantitative data, such as asking who is making the decision about the complaints, how they are making those decisions, and what is the internal dialogue when agencies see the low number of sustained complaints in their own data. The subcommittee agreed that diving deeper into the RIPA complaint data would not be as fruitful in addressing the issue of the low number of sustained complaints, as the subcommittee has already done a deeper dive into those statistics. With respect to the accountability section of this year's report, moving to the accountability topic proposals, the DOJ did facilitate discussions of the following topics. Number one, immigration enforcement. In light of the federal immigration actions in California, the subcommittee and the board at large had expressed a desire to explore ways to support state and local law enforcement officers, in protecting California's diverse population. The subcommittee could explore the overlap between immigration enforcement and RIPA's objective of reducing racial and identity bias. More specifically, the subcommittee could assess whether law enforcement officers can be held accountable for biased conduct that occurs during work performed in the immigration enforcement context. Additionally, the subcommittee could assess whether existing legislation provides an accountability mechanism for prospective peace officers who have previously demonstrated racial or identity bias while working for the entity that engages in immigration enforcement. Further, the subcommittee could assess whether existing legislation provides an accountability mechanism for existing peace officers who demonstrate racial identity bias while moonlighting for an entity that engages in immigration enforcement. Specifically, as to existing peace officers, the subcommittee could evaluate whether SB 2 decertification protections are broad enough to encompass peace officers' racial or identity bias that occurs with a current employer. Number two, auditing. A second topic that could be included in this year's report is auditing. Given the board's serious concern with the low sustained rate for racial and identity profiling complaints to the RIPA data, the DOJ proposed that the subcommittee could conduct research to evaluate the best practices for internal audits of the complaint and investigation process, with an eye towards identifying the key operational factors for success, such as alignment with the strategic goals, confidentiality, competence, and objectivity. This subcommittee could also identify the challenges of maintaining independence, especially when the internal auditors are employees of the organization they audit. The subcommittee decided to focus this year's report on evaluating and proposing best practices for internal audit of law enforcement complaint and investigation processes. Sister Moderator, this is the report from the Accountability and the Civilians Complaint from April the 23rd, 2026, based on the meeting that occurred March the 24th, 2026. DJ Kreiner, I've given you our report. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Pastor Kreiner. Okay, so we'll move on to a second subcommittee. Why don't we get the report from the Post-Training and Recruitment Subcommittee? I think that might be Pastor Ford. We'll see if we're hearing an echo or not.
It is. Can you hear me?
Yes, I think that's better. Yes.
Awesome. Hopefully you're not getting the feedback anymore.
No.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I ask your patience as this is my first time presenting. So I hope that what I share today makes at least a little bit of sense. The Post Subcommittee met on March 12th of this year and discussed its plans for the 27 report, including review of the Post Field Training Program material and post AB 953 guidelines on racial and identity profiling. Post field training program, background information. As you know, the RIPA board is mandated to review and analyze the training courses certified by POST to assess the effectiveness of the training in eliminating racial and identity profiling by sworn officers. The board has already reviewed courses identified by POST as relating to racial and identity profiling, and this year is finishing its review of POST field training program materials. The field training program, the FTP, is structured to bridge the gap between theoretical academic training, and practical field application, targeting officers who have completed the post-regular basic courses. The subcommittee's review of the FTP materials has been a 2-year process that began last year. Last year, the post chapter of the 2026 RIPA report described the FTP materials, the role of the field training officer, FTOs, and the role of the FTP supervisor/administrator and/or coordinators, SAC. The chapter also discussed that the GOJ retained 2 consultants to assess the subcommittee with its 2-year review, one with expertise in law enforcement academic research, including the study of bias and other former California law enforcement executives with 37 years of operational experience. This year, the subcommittee will conclude its review of the FTP materials. During that subcommittee meeting on the 12th of March, to that end, subcommittee meeting primarily focused on and discussed the post subcommittee's review of post field training, the FTP materials. The post chapter of this year, RIPA's report will focus on reviewing the FTP Section 6, Community Relations, Professional Demeanor, which was identified by POST as the most relevant to the RIPA mandate. During the March 12th meeting, DOJ consultants Dr. Rebecca Hattie and retired Chief Daniel Hahn walked POST subcommittee members through a Section 6 rubric that they designed last year. The rubric will guide subcommittee members as they review Section 6 and solicit specific written feedback. All subcommittee members were asked to participate as Section 6 review of this important program and are expected to submit their written feedback to California DOJ by May 15. Of note, after the subcommittee meeting on April 8th, the DOJ team emailed modified instructions to POST subcommittee members to eliminate possible confusion on how to approach the Section 6 review. The modified instructions reminded subcommittee members that they are only evaluating Section 6, not the full FTP experience, and that they are not evaluating pedagogy, instructional methods, or delivery quality. Feedback from subcommittee member is still due May 15th. Trust me, we are clear about that expectation. Post AB 953 guidelines on racial and identity profiling. In addition to the subcommittee review of the FTP materials, this year's post chapter will include a review of post AB 953 guidelines on racial and identity profiling. Some of that background information is as follows. As many of you may know, AB 953 requires the Post Commission to develop, disseminate guidelines related to racial and identity profiling. On September 9 of last year, 2025, the Post Commission approved its AB 953 guidelines on racial identity profiling. Post cited the subcommittee co-chair as expert consultants during the development of these guidelines. Since the Post subcommittee co-chairs were cited as experts consulting during the development of this AB 953 guidelines, they engaged in preliminary review of all the AB 953 guidelines. The rest of the subcommittee will do a full review of the guidelines after the next subcommittee meeting, which will likely take place in the month of June. The subcommittee meeting during this particular meeting that took place on March 12th, Co-chairs shared their thoughts from their preliminary review of AB 953 guidelines. Co-chairs shared they were pleased to learn the post included many of the recommendations made by the RIPA board in past reports, such as emphasis on community stakeholders, the historical context of policing, use of RIPA data and related legal obligations, and scenarios-based training. Co-chairs shared that in keeping with the board's previous recommendations, they would like posts to consider using their guidelines to align all RIPA-related post courses, and in that way, have AB 953 guidelines serve as a statewide framework. They expressed concern that the guidelines in practice would only apply to a 4-hour course. In terms of next steps, at the next subcommittee meeting in June, all post-subcommittee members will be asked to review the AB 953 guidelines, since they will have completed their Section 6 reviews. I concede my time to the.
Great. Thank you, Pastor Ford. Okay. And as you all know, we'll have an opportunity to discuss all of these issues being brought up in the subcommittee report outs later in our agenda. Thank you for their readout. Next, we'll hear from our state and local racial and identity profiling policies subcommittee.
Yes, and this is John Dobard, co-chair of that committee, and I will be reporting out. The policy subcommittee met last month on March 19th. During that meeting, we discussed potential framing and topics for the 2027 report. This included providing DOJ with guidance about the section's overall direction and priorities, as well as considering suggestions from DOJ about topics. In terms of framing, we discussed using a past, present, and future frame to organize topics in the policy section. We think this is appropriate because the 2027 report will be the 10th report issued by the board. The past section would comprise a longitudinal analysis of policies recommended by the board and adopted by Wave 1 agencies, with the hope of seeing where those policies have been effective. The present section would comprise an analysis of current law enforcement tactics that potentially help drive the racial and identity disparities that we see today. So this would include looking at automatic license plate readers or ALPR data. ALPR capabilities continue to expand beyond simply reading license plates. Some systems can search for specific bumper stickers, process specialty tags, and recognize rideshare logos. Given expanded capabilities such as these, we want to investigate the potential for such systems to increase disparities in police actions. This section would also explore the extent to which federal immigration enforcement authorities may have access to California LEA's ALPR data, which would raise concern that federal immigration authorities may be using California agencies' ALPR data to help target communities of color. The section would also include discussion of so-called Kavanaugh stops. Last year, as many folks know, the Supreme Court stayed a California District Court's injunction against racial profiling and immigration stops while the case is being litigated. RIPA prohibits state and local law enforcement officers from considering race or ethnicity to any degree in deciding whether to make a stop or in deciding what actions to take following a stop. The policy subcommittee instructed DOJ staff to look into what the risks are for Kavanaugh stops in limited circumstances where California agencies are in joint task forces with federal law enforcement agencies. So again, that would be the focus. Since SB 54 doesn't prohibit participation in joint task forces where immigration enforcement is not the primary purpose, the subcommittee is interested in exploring what the exposures or potential risks are for profiling by state and local officers in that space so that they're fully aware. Finally, the present section would also take a closer look at disparities in post-stop actions relating to non-English fluency. This would build on the analysis around language fluency done last year by looking at what the data shows with respect to language proficiency and race. More specifically, the policy section would look at stops where officers perceived individuals as having limited or no English proficiency and examine whether there are differences across racial and ethnic groups and things like what actions the officer took during stops and outcomes and the outcomes of stops and how long those stops lasted. And whether we see a trend that for some groups having limited English has a disparate adverse impact in terms of what happens to them during stops as compared to other groups. Although the subcommittee expressed concern about bandwidth on this topic, we didn't rule it out for inclusion, and DOJ staff are looking into this topic now. Lastly, the future section would focus on the use of technologies to try to reduce racial and identity profiling and disparities. One topic we decided should be explored is the use of technology-assisted body-worn cameras. Researchers note that most body-worn camera footage isn't reviewed after a stop takes place. At least one company is now offering technology to LEAs that they can use to transcribe body-worn camera audio to detect and notify LEA leadership of potential issues. Technology in this area can be used to identify and address potential instances of racial profiling, trends or patterns of apparent racial bias, and other conduct that leads to racial disparities in police actions. The subcommittee also decided to explore this. So that is where we are. A lot there, and happy to address this when we open it up for discussion.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Jobard. And we'll move on to our fourth subcommittee, our Stop Data Analysis Subcommittee, for its report.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. So the Stop Data Subcommittee met on March 17th, so just last month, like many of the other committees. And we began with some report outs from DOJ. First, very importantly, DOJ shared that the public RIPA data dashboard should be released later this year. And as we all know, this is extremely significant to make data that's being reported out both accessible and transparent to the public. Our understanding in this meeting is that the subcommittee or possibly the full board could provide feedback even after or close to the release. And so I want to emphasize the board is really, as called many times, as others have for the data dashboard, and so thank you to DOJ. We're looking forward to this. DOJ staff also walked the subcommittee through some other items, including the data collection form. So this is a form called CJIS 2000, so that everyone has a good understanding of what is and isn't collected under RIPA, and that form appears in the appendix of the 2026 report. And then finally, in terms of DOJ report outs, the staff shared an overview, very broad overview of immigration enforcement related data. One challenge is that the federal agencies are not reporting data through RIPA, and they haven't even been updating what data they used to share online in the same way as they had in the past. But the subcommittee discussed how other sources of data could provide some context on state and local agency interaction. With immigration enforcement, there were specific suggestions around looking for pass-off data from local law enforcement. Board members reminded us that the Truth Act requires regional reporting, and we've already heard from the policy subcommittee much more, and we'll see in the report focus on these issues. So the subcommittee then started discussing or focused on topic areas for the 2027 report. So as I just mentioned specifically, there's a strong interest in looking at immigration enforcement related data, even if that analysis is limited in some way, but still the intersections with state and local agencies on immigration issues. There was also discussion within the subcommittee of looking at transportation related topics, in particular, for example, differentiating even between the type of vehicle stops. Is it, so we already know the data is now differentiated by car, cyclists, and pedestrians who can all have very different experiences, but also within vehicle stops, are there types of stops, for example, vehicles that are transporting a larger number of people. Also looking at stops on public transportation. One important comment came up that regarding pedestrian stops, that door knocks are recorded as pedestrian stops. I think that's a small fraction of stops, but that's something for us to be aware of. It may also be informative to look or differentiate calls for service versus officer-initiated actions. And then finally, the subcommittee expressed a very strong interest. This echoes policies subcommittee's been talking about in looking at a longitudinal analysis, that is looking at RIPA data over time. We'd like to see a focus on have there been changes over time, in particular that we might connect to particular reforms or practices or policies, outcomes, or have there not been changes? So, as a concrete example, pretextual stops, or the use of consent as a basis for search, sometimes even when it's the only basis, so a purely discretionary action on the part of the officer. These are concerns we've looked at in the past, but now we have many years of data, and so we're especially interested in what changes can be found. In particular, are there practices or policies that show promise that have been implemented by law enforcement, or are there practices that don't show promise? So, for example, when it comes to traffic stops, are there agencies moving towards less of a focus on equipment violations that don't impact public safety? Looking over the years, as Board Member Dobard just shared, could mean we're hitting a 10-year mark. It might also mean focusing sort of pre-COVID and post-COVID to look for change, or it might be over a shorter number of years where we have data from more agencies. But these were the areas of consideration at any rate that the subcommittee discussed. And there's overlap with policies. So when we move to the drafts section, when we discuss the drafts, we should see a lot of this reflected already in the policy section. Thank you. That's the report out from the Stop Data Subcommittee.
Wonderful. Thank you, Professor Kajabi. So those are our subcommittee reports, giving us a lot to discuss later today. But we can now move on to our next agenda item, which is the updates by the Department of Justice and a board discussion regarding those updates. So I'll turn it over to our DOJ staff.
Thank you again, Co-Chair Sierra. We are, as you have just heard, we are hard at work on the 2027 report. Some of the things that we're just about to give a presentation on actually touch on some of the items that the subcommittee report outs just gave. So I'm going to turn this over to our research services team to give you further explanation of preliminary data and analysis that they have been doing so far.
Thank you, Alexander. I'll go ahead and share my screen, and we do have a presentation. The first part of this is going to sound a lot like what we just heard. My name is Dr. Eric Van Holm. I'm here to present on behalf of the Research Center at the Department of Justice. I am the principal researcher on the RIPA work here, and later there'll be a short presentation by Dr. Daniel Harmon. So this presentation today will be shorter than ones we'll do later in the report cycle. We don't have any data to report on yet. The reporting date for LEA is March 31st, but those files are submitted and standardized before they're turned over to us for data analysis. We hope to have them soon, but we don't have them yet. And so we do not have 2025 data to give anything on. But I'll remind you that we had over 5 million stops last year from 533 agencies. We'll be able to compare that in the future. In lieu of data, what we're going to do today is talk about the future. The hope with this presentation is to describe what we've heard the board request to this point, so that additional requests and alterations can be received before we begin our work. And a lot of this will sound similar to what was just described by the subcommittees. These analyses described are in addition to the standard analyses we complete every year, breaking down various stops by the demographics collected in RIPA. These are sort of the discretionary things that we're choosing to include in this year's report. And at the end of this presentation today, there will be an update on the dashboard given by Dr. Daniel Harmon. So the first of three analyses that I'll describe in this presentation is the longitudinal work. As has been noted, RIPA has met for nearly 10 years now. while not all agencies have been reporting data for that entire time, that provides enough time and data to look at trends. And as part of the analysis, we plan to report some of our demographics or some of our descriptive statistics, like the numbers of stops and for different groups and outcomes over the period of data collection reporting to sort of build out the direction things appear to be heading, to build out sort of the statewide trends in these different features. The reports generally capture it for 1 year at a time. We're going to take a chance to look across those, 8 years and see where things are, what the direction is. But in addition, given the number of years that are available, we may be able to analyze whether any specific policies have had a noticeable impact. And we're currently reviewing statewide laws and local policies to identify potential notable efforts. So this slide gives more details on what that analysis will look like, hopefully. Although I'm trying to keep this at a high level because, again, we don't have data. We haven't actually begun analyzing any policies. But we have about 7 years of data for various agencies. And so what we can look at is various policies implemented at the state or local level and analyze trends over time for various outcomes of interest, such as disparities in stops, actions taken, or other things captured by the RIPA data, and see whether a specific policy had an impact. These analyses would be similar to the study we did in last year's report on the change in policy for pretextual stops that SFPD and LAPD implemented. And we'd also be able to update that with another year's data. And what we're looking for is a change when the policy is implemented and whether there is a change that sustains itself in any direction after that policy. The graph shows what a really clear policy impact might look like, but we don't know what we'll find. But what we're looking for is some change in the direction, the trend of something over time, at the time that the implementation occurs, and some kind of change that lasts over time. Things will change month to month, things will change year to year. There are a lot of factors that go into trends in the RIPA data, but we're looking for a clear discernible pattern after a policy is implemented. We don't have enough data for all agencies to do this at a statewide level for all 500 agencies. A lot of those have only been reporting for a few years. And so we're going to specifically be looking at Wave 1 and Wave 2 agencies, which gives us enough time to sort of identify significant trends. A second set of analyses concerns the interaction of race and language fluency. In past years' reports, we have looked at those two variables separately, individually. And this year it was proposed that we analyze the impacts that language fluency has on different racial groups as an interaction. In particular, we were asked to see whether certain actions or outcomes occur at a higher or lower rate within racial groups for those that do not speak English compared to those that do speak English fluently. Because RIPA doesn't directly collect data on immigration status, this analysis is proposed as something of a proxy, something that captures sort of the impacts of those, although it's indirect. In particular, this analysis has been proposed to be conducted longitudinally, looking across years in addition to the other longitudinal work, to see whether there's a significant difference between the treatment of groups based on language fluency between 2024 and 2025, given the changes in federal priorities. While federal policy shouldn't have a direct effect on local LEAs, we want to see if there's anything in sort of that climate that may have trickled down, that may have changed the ways that different communities were interacted with. There's a set of variables at the bottom of this slide that have been proposed for the analysis, although these may shift over time. Looking at things like removal from a vehicle, field sobriety tests being conducted, curbside detention, psychiatric hold, handcuffing, firearm use, and search as sort of a set of actions that and beginning of stops that may be different between different groups based on their language fluency. Finally, third analysis focuses on transportation. The board has noted that people of color ride public transit at higher rates. And so there was an interest in seeing if there was a disparity in stops among racial ethnic groups. Principally, there was an interest in seeing what differences, if any, there were in reason for stop and result of stop by racial ethnic group based on whether the stop occurred on transit. There is no direct variable in RIPA that captures whether it was a public transit stop. And so we're trying to analyze the data to identify those using a collection of different variables, using the narrative, location, the specific agency, the type of infraction that's cited, to give us a clue and to and to identify a subset of public transit stops. And so our work on that has begun. And so those are 3 of the suggestions that we've heard so far. And of course, there's time for discussion today and in future meetings to develop new analyses. But this is where we are beginning as we receive the data in the next week or so. And so now I will turn it over to my colleague, Daniel Harmon, to give an update on the RIPA dashboard.
Hello, Dr. Daniel Harmon here with the RIPA Data Dashboard update. I'm here to talk about the efforts that we've been putting into the dashboard creation and to give you all a few more details and a first look at the dashboard now that we have it in a more finalized state. Before I do, I'd like to thank and acknowledge the Office of Traffic Safety for helping to fund the development of this dashboard. And to talk about the goals of this dashboard, where with this first RIPA dashboard, we really wanted to look at the core stop data statistics that create the foundation for our annual reports. We wanted to take all of that data, all of the really essential information that RIPA provides, and make that explorable, visualizable, and examinable by the general public in a user-friendly way. And we are going to include all years of data except for the most recent year. So not the data that is getting used for this year's report, but 2018 to 2024, all years prior, will be included into the dashboard. And it can be found on Open Justice when we do make it public. And without further ado, if you go next, we can see what the dashboard actually looks like. And so this is the initial page that talks about the core descriptives, statistics of the dashboard. And here you can see pretty much all of the main stop statistics, right? The number of stops, whether this stop was a call for service, whether it was officer initiated, and then the actions during a stop, the reason for the stop, the result of stop. And we can then look through how these are all separated by the key demographics for the data that we report or collect in RIPA. So race, gender, age, what have you, for the years that we have it, right? So we have housing status in there, but that's only available for 2024 because we didn't collect it before then. And so users on this dashboard page can then take a look at all of these, explore the different visuals, look at the different demographics, and then filter that by year and by agency. So you want to see how San Diego Police Department was in 2018, you can do that. If you want to compare that to 2022, you can take a look at that too. And so this should give a good exploration of that overall information. But let's say you want to look at results of stop in a bit more granular way. We also have a page for that. If you go next. There's the deeper dive page looking at the results of stop in a within and between differences categories. So if you want to look at how the results of stop differ within a particular category, let's say Asian individuals, you can do that here by looking at, what's the percentage of stops that resulted in an arrest for Asian individuals. And you will say that 65% of those end in an arrest. But then what does that mean for the broader context, right? In the context of the whole population of California. And you can see then that Asian individuals who end up in an arrest account for about a little under 1.5% of all stops, right? So this allows you to examine more closely what's happening within particular demographics, whether that be race, gender, disability, and then contextualize that for all demographics within the whole population. And again, similar to that first page, it is filterable by year, by agency. And that is our dashboard so I can turn it over for any questions that the board might have.
Great. Thank you both. Really incredibly helpful presentations. Let me turn it over to our board members if anybody has any questions on either presentation or comments or anything they would like to discuss while we have our folks from the Research Center team with us.
Captain Jose Alatorre, I have a quick question. Is it for the RIPA data dashboard, is it going to be limited to just those categories that you showed, or are you going to be able to break it down by like duration of stop, outcome of stops, more in depth by the other categories as well, or is it limited to just those ones?
So the result, we do have a result of stop. We do not have a representation for duration of stop at this time. So it would just be those core stop data statistics. And for the results of stop, we don't have every single result of stop. We have used, like we do in the annual report, the most common results, and then we've collapsed the most, the least frequent stops within an other category.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, great question.
Yes, Professor Kajabi.
Oh, please call me Lily. But thank you. But first of all, thank you so much to the folks at DOJ. It's really great to see both hear the where the analysis is headed this year and to see the data dashboards. Thank you so much. I also had, as a previous board member, a quick question about the dashboard. I was wondering, since the newer data lets us immediately differentiate vehicle, pedestrian, and cyclist stops, I'm wondering if that could happen even with the later data sets in the next, maybe it's an iteration of the data dashboard. And I only mention it because looking in the rearview mirror, historically, things like search rates sometimes are very different for pedestrians relative to cars. Sometimes they're much higher for pedestrians. And so they're meaningful, you know, we get a different window or we get a better view in when we can make that differentiation. And in the past, it was more challenging to do that because it had to be done through what, if there was a violation code saying, oh, this must have been a vehicle stop based on the violation code that was entered, but now it can be done directly. So I guess I'm just saying it as a friendly suggestion that could be very valuable.
Of course, yes, that's a great suggestion, and it's one that we can and are exploring for future dashboards potentially.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Board Member Ghazi.
Thanks for the presentations. Dr. Van Helm, the third category you talked about disparities across transportation types. You mentioned that because it's not listed on the form, the transportation, that you would be deriving that data from other sources, like looking at the narrative of the police reports. So I was wondering, have you employed that methodology before in other RIPA reports where you've gone beyond kind of the four corners of the form and tried to derive data from the narrative of other places, and how has that worked? And then the follow-up to that is, have you already kind of looked at that? Do you think that there's going to be a critical mass in the data, or could you maybe coming back in a couple of months being, you know what, we couldn't actually pull that many types, so it's not something worth looking at?
So each row in the RIPA data has a narrative field, and we did an analysis a year or two ago trying to understand what's in those fields, 5 million of them. And generally the narrative field does not, it has a character limit when the police officer is entering it. It's like 240 characters. And so this isn't them writing a novel about, the interaction that they had. And generally what they're writing is something very direct. And, a lot of the entries are just, a reiteration of what the infraction was, or sort of, very limited details. And so we using that, you can't really build, a complete data set of anything out of it. And so this is one place where we're trying to use it to see where that is listed. You can find sort of, if you're looking for something specific, you can use the narrative field. But in general, for lack of sort of a different way of describing it, it's not typically a very interesting field. It's generally just very direct data input. And so we are trying to identify as many public transit stops as we can. I think the hope is that there will be sort of sufficient, even if it probably won't be the sort of universe of all transit stops that occur. But I don't actually have an intuitive feel of how common those are. Out of the 5 million stops last year, how many should be on public transit? And so I think the hope is that we can complete that analysis, though.
Great, thank you.
See, we have a question from Chief Randolph.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sierra. Dr. Van Holm, Dr. Arman, thank you so much for your presentation. I just had one question on the dashboard. Based on the dashboard and a lot of data that's going to be collected and provided, I just want to confirm at this point in time, there's no need to alter any more data collection on the law enforcement side. You've got multiple agencies that are putting information and using multiple systems to DOJ, and then DOJ massages data, which goes to the dashboard. I just want to confirm the dashboard can function with all the data you have right now. There won't be another request for additional platforms or whatnot, because that is a concern with several chiefs at this time.
Yeah, while I certainly can't speak to requests for different platforms or anything like that in general, the dashboard as we have constructed it will function on the data that is already reported because it exists and it is there. So yes, you'll get something. If you want other types of data or anything like that, maybe that answer will differ. But right now, yes, a dashboard can be produced with the data that we have.
Great. Let's see. We have Captain Elatori.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. When did you say that this should go live? And you guys are building this obviously in conjunction. That's going to be an in-house product, right? Or are you guys contracting out?
Yes, we at the Research Services branch are creating this dashboard ourselves. We are hoping and aiming for a mid to late summer release, and we're confident that we can meet that unless there's, any hiccups in the infrastructure of actually getting it onto the Open Justice website. But we don't anticipate that at this time.
Okay, thank you.
And Chief Randolph?
Sorry, thank you so much. Sorry, Angela, I won't ask any more questions.
No problem. This is a great opportunity. We have our folks here.
On the rollout, you guys had said that it was funded by the Office of Traffic Safety. So that's fully funded by the Office of Traffic Safety, or was there another funding source here in the state, or was there any other funding sources?
That's a great question. So it wasn't fully funded by the Office of Traffic Safety. It was partially funded by the Office of Traffic Safety for a grant that we did to get it off the ground. But it is funded through. I can't speak too much about the economic side of where all the money comes from, but it is funded through programs that we have at the DOJ.
Thank you.
Let's see. I think we see a hand from a member of the public, but we will have public comment later in the day. Any other comments or questions from board members?
I actually think that the hand may have come from Director Jans over in our office here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
No,
Yes.
it's no problem. Apologies for the confusion. I was just going to further clarify, as Dr. Harmon mentioned, we received partial funding through the Office of Traffic Safety. The remaining of the funds came from the DOJ to create the dashboards.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask a question from Board Member Talese?
Yes.
I don't, because I'm working off my phone. I don't have that hand raising.
No, no,
feature,
it's
but
fine.
I was just curious. Oh, thank you. For the research center, maybe a question for them, but did they have unfettered access to the data, or were they given specific data sets to analyze?
Is that
can
in
help me with
reference?
that.
Yeah, is that in reference to
Yeah, so
the planned analyses or the
to
dashboard?
the dashboard.
The dashboard utilizes the full RIPA data. It's not
Okay, so you
yeah, it's
so
not a subset of the data.
compartmentalized. Okay, okay, so you had unfettered access, pretty much. I guess my question is like you were given the data from what we've collected, and then you built a dashboard, and nothing was withheld from you, or you were only provided certain data sets.
Yes, that's correct. Nothing was withheld from us in either the production of the report or the production of this dashboard.
Well, thank you.
You. See, any other questions or comments from our board members? Okay. Well, not hearing any, I just very much also want to thank Drs. Van Holm and Harmon. Really helpful and just really exciting that you're working on this and it's going to be launched. As you're saying, the focus target date is, you said, mid or late summer. So we're really looking forward to that. I think it's going to be really helpful to our board, researchers, the public, and to law enforcement agencies as well. So thank you all for your work on this and your presentations.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
And so, Alex, I'll turn it back to you if there's any further updates from Department of Justice.
Thank you, Co-Chair Sierra. No, this is all the updates that we have from the DOJ. Just want to thank all of the board members, subcommittee members for all of the work to date. As always, if there are questions, thoughts, other things that you might want to ask about this presentation or about other items that we've talked about in this meeting, please feel free to reach out to us at any time and we'd be happy to chat.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alex. So before we go to the next agenda item, which is a break, and then I'll be turning the agenda over to our co-chair, Andrea Guerrero, for a discussion for plans regarding the 2027 report, etc. I just want to, again, open it up to our board members if there's any discussion, anything any folks want to talk about with respect to what we just heard before we move on to the next item, which will be our break. I'll see if there's any show of hands.
Quick question from board member Talise.
Yes.
Did this include the part, unless I missed it, the 4 advisory board reports? Is this an opportunity to ask a specific question, or are we going to come back to those?
Well, we'll be coming back to that when we talk about the plans for the 2027 report,
Okay.
since a lot of what they talked about are in some of the outlines. So I think that'll be a good opportunity
Okay, I'll
for
hold.
that. Okay.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, well, not hearing or anything or seeing any hands, why don't we take a 10-minute break? So right now it's 1:07, so we will come back at 1:17 to resume our meeting. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you in 10 minutes.
Good afternoon, everybody. As we come back from break, just a reminder to board members to turn your cameras on so that we can reestablish quorum. To the members of the public, please keep your cameras off at this time until the public comment portion of the meeting. Thank you so much. Good afternoon again. Just a reminder to board members, we are ready to get started with the second half of today's board meeting. Reminder to board members to turn your cameras on so that we can get an accurate count and reestablish quorum to get started with the second half of the meeting. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much for your patience. Quorum has been reestablished. I will now turn it over to our co-chair.
Okay, thank you so much for the DOJ presentation that we heard from before the break. We will now turn to a board discussion of plans for the 2027 report. We have heard the subcommittee reports, some of which included mention of what the work could be looking forward. We have heard from the Department of Justice about the work that they have been doing already to move in that direction. And this is our opportunity for the board to reflect on the plan for the 2027 report. And I'll just pause to see if the Department of Justice wanted to add anything to that context before we open it up for discussion.
Thank you, Co-Chair Guerrero. Yes, as stated, what we on the DOJ side are most interested in hearing any feedback, any direction, any additional areas of research or focus. One of the things that is always helpful for the board, not to have a vote or anything like that, but to come to a consensus about what the theme of this year's report would be. So previously, in years past, we've had, last year we had the theme was public safety and its relationship to racial identity profiling. Previously, it was on youth and youth interactions with law enforcement. So if the discussion can help to shape the theme for this year's report, that would be most helpful so that we can present a report that's most responsive to the board's interests. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, well, I invite board members to share their thoughts on what would be most valuable for the DOJ staff to focus their energy on, and think about a theme for this year's report. I know that's been a conversation in some of the committees already, so I welcome your thoughts, and I'll begin with Board Member Ford.
I'm not sure if the direct connection, understand the relevance, but maybe not the direct connection but between federal government, federal police and enforcement versus local and state, specifically as it pertains to ICE. Not sure if there could be some dialogue as to those interactions and how they overlap and don't overlap. I mean, I've heard so many different things. I know the general separations, but it seems like some of those lines are being blurred in different sections. Maybe not in our county per se of San Bernardino, greatest county in the world. Maybe not specifically in this county, but I know that there's been some pretty dramatic blurring of lines between those relationships. Not sure if that would be any value of conversations or thematic directioning, but that is something I'd definitely love to hear more conversation about.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know we've talked about this. It came up in the committee reports, and just to clarify and level set, under state law, local and state agencies cannot participate in immigration enforcement. However, there's an exemption for joint task forces. We don't know enough about those, and it was suggested that we dig in a little bit more into those, because they are prevalent throughout the state, and it allows state and local law enforcement officers to engage in joint enforcement operations as long as immigration is not the primary focus. So I think some of the other concern is around the spillover effect, or the ways in which federal enforcement is pulling in local law enforcement. And that's happening through calls for mutual aid. That's happening through calls from the community to intervene. So and of course the impact of racial profiling stops at the federal level, and how that gets understood and translated by the community. So Board Member Ford, I hear you suggesting that that we sharpen what that intersection would look like in the report, and that it could be a potential focus of the report. Is that?
Can I just add this other tandem idea that I was thinking through, and that is, if there's a threat against my life, I'm gonna call the police. And I wonder if there's some level of that. If the threat to me is ICE, can I still call the police?
Yeah. Yes, and in fact, we had a whole presentation on this in last year in October. We had a whole conversation with the Attorney General on duty to intervene, the law enforcement's duty and responsibility and authority to intervene in ICE operations. And so we invite you and the members of the public to view that. We did mention it briefly in the last year's report, but I think this area is of conversation, or this topic is, several committees have suggested we focus in on it, sharpen the public's awareness, understanding, analysis through the data that we collect, the policies that we review, to advance the conversation in the legislature. And I saw Board Member Armeling. I think we just lost him.
With regard to what you were just saying, I'm not certain how well understood that is in the public.
Right.
I would say in my, I would say in my experience working with the community right now, that would not be the understanding of the public, at least where I am. I won't speak for other counties, but like where we are. I just wanted to say that I know this gets outside of sort of our purview in some ways in terms of the data that we're collecting, but just to kind of round out the conversation in terms of concerns of where this overlap is happening. I know in our county, one of the concerns has been cooperation at the jail level. So it's not necessarily at the level of stop, but cooperation in terms of release from jail. So that's been one of the big fights in our county is the extent to which there's been multiple protests at Elmwood because of this Elmwood facility. So I think if we're gonna talk about this, we should talk about it as holistically as we can, just to give the best service to the public that we can in our report.
Yeah, so it might be worthwhile just doing just a level set with the public and just a re-up. I mean, this information exists in other places, in other bodies, in other circles. It's on the AG's website, for example. Yeah, and so I mean the law is clear about what law enforcement can and cannot do, local and state. Counties can do more than what state law allows, and that's where the fights have been. And so I think, yeah, just a context level set to clarify for the public. So I'm hearing that as a potential topic of inclusion for the report. I'm not sure if it rises to a full theme. And welcome folks' suggestions on what a theme could be, like a thread that runs through all of the sections. Board Member Dovard.
Yeah, I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to reiterate what was said earlier. The discussion we had in the policy subcommittee, and this was also reflected in conversations in the Stop Data subcommittee, was for this past, present, future framework to help organize things for the report. Where, again, because this is the 10th report coming out, this is an opportunity for us to do some retrospect, like a looking back, seeing what lessons we can learn from that. But what was also stated in the policy subcommittee is we can't or shouldn't just focus on that. That's where the present and future come up. And it's what can we say about what's going on now? And then what can we say in terms of the future of what should be happening? And so at least the way the policies conversation went, that is the thing. With different subcomponents under those different themes. And again, I think that was also consistent with the conversation that the Stop Data subcommittee had. So I just want to reiterate that and propose that whatever we talk about, one is whether other board members, hearing from other board members about that as a potential organizing theme. And then the other is insofar as there is consensus about that, having our conversation move in the direction of, okay, within that framework, are there particular things that folks want to be discussed?
Thank you. Board Member Kazi.
Along those lines, I do recall a couple things from our conversations last year. Having the longitudinal study aspect did come up in several meetings. Like have we looked at changes across the year? So I do think it is time for that. Another common thread, as we all know, was the impact of policing and immigration enforcement on our local communities. We had that special session, and we did keep saying we will revisit that and focus it in some capacity, hope to, on this year's report. So even if that is the present section in the way that Board Member Dobar just explained it. I do think that does need to, it requires a bulk of it. We talked about, policies, we talked about language fluency issues. That's, to me, that ties in really well with the theme of the impact on immigrant communities or those perceived to be immigrant or of limited English proficiency. I would also want to stress that might not be borne out in the data, but it could be, especially if we are looking at narrative sections. Is this gray area with how local law enforcement enables immigration enforcement. I'm looking at situations, things such as crowd control, and a lot of the work I do around with protesters and protest movements. Sometimes it's a planned protest, sometimes it's a very organic thing where people show up when there's ICE enforcement activity, and then local law enforcement is called out for crowd control and ends up using force, arresting people, stops and searches of people who are stepping out as community members to protect their own. So to me, that is an enabling tactic for immigration enforcement. Another thing that came up in our local community in Fullerton just a month or two ago was ICE was in pursuit of a suspect that or what they called a suspect for immigration enforcement who was armed. And then the Fullerton Police Department ended up building a perimeter to enable ICE to go in and capture that person for ICE, for immigration enforcement. So I do think that there is this gray area. I don't know if it will be borne out through the data, but I'd be interested in hearing from the staff or from others how we could sort of explore that in a meaningful way and in a way that, holds up the integrity of this report.
Thank you, Board Member Kazi. So what I'm hearing is so far, and we can adjust the conversation, but I'm hearing a theme emerging around past, present, future in this 10th report, and the possibility of housing the question around the interplay of immigration enforcement with local and state law enforcement, placing that into like a present analysis, and looking to see what the data can tell us about that situation. There is data that we collect about pass-offs, and it doesn't tell us very much, but beyond the data, we can look to additional sources to understand what's going on and raise the questions and look back at this issue. So that's what I'm hearing so far: past, present, future, with with part of the present conversation talking about the new versions of immigration enforcement, what that looks like. I've also heard from the policy committee things like ALPR, sort of new technologies, and I wonder if technology could be part of this conversation about future. We have a lot of things are moving very quickly in the modern world, and a lot of questions are being raised. Angela.
Yes, so I too think this is, I really like this idea of past, present, future, because I think we're at a point that really would be really great for reflection and looking back. And we're going to be doing the longitudinal study and looking at, which of our recommendations have been adopted, which have not, what policies have changed at the state or local level, and looking, has the needle moved at all on disparities, and if so, where, and what could be, the causes for those, improvements, if we see improvements in disparities. So I think, it's our 10th report. And so I think it's a really good opportunity to do that for reflection. And I'm really also very excited about talking about the future, especially as you just mentioned, technology is really changing so quickly, and we have these AI tools, and we're looking at the draft based on what the work of the subcommittee so far, talking about some of the concerns that we have regarding, artificial intelligence and other technologies, but also that it can really give us, law enforcement, our communities, a tool to really potentially really help law enforcement agencies really understand and really look at their data to kind of see if there are some areas that could be improved within their departments. Maybe it is like certain types of stops, for example, or certain units, or just something to help enhance law enforcement's ability for accountability. And so I think we're at, a really good time to do that. So I'd be very supportive of the past, where we are, in the future.
Board Member Randolph.
Thank you so much, Chair Guerrero. I agree with everyone here, especially Dr. Armele and Dr. Dobard, about past, future, and present. And I think this is phenomenal. But one thing I do want to bring up that's the common denominator is we are going into 10 years. We've been collecting data. And I'd also like us, I have to throw out that we have to talk about our progression. If we haven't had any progression, which we have, okay, regardless of what data or what might be modified in reports or whatnot, there's a lot of progression that has occurred in 10 years. Some of you have been on this board since it started. And I think that progression, the positive, for the win for law enforcement, has to be highlighted, and it has to come from this board. And legislators that I've spoken to, the ones that are watching right now, yes, I think we need to highlight. It was a monolith to get this system started, phase one, phase two, and now it's running. It was a monolith even in the law enforcement phase for it to be adapted to law enforcement. But we need to talk about racial disparities have declined, and I'd like to see that. It needs to come from this board. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's an excellent point, Board Member Randolph. I think, I personally am liking the past, present, future framing. I welcome other thoughts about that and what it can illuminate for us. Perhaps while people are thinking, I'll just share, some additional thoughts. So we're charged with identifying and addressing racial identity profiling, and the reason why we care about that is because one of the fundamental rights in this country should be the right to be free of searches and seizures without cause, and racial profiling, when it is in operation, becomes anathema to this idea of justification for searches and seizures, right? Somebody is using race or identity as a pretext to then engage in a stop, a search, seizure, and so on, right? And so when we're thinking about the data and how the data might connect to this concept of past, present, and future, it makes sense. And when we're thinking about the policies that may have evolved or still need to evolve, we think about policies around stops and that are based on pretexts, to the extent we can identify that. And that's been a struggle for us to do, and we do that through looking at the disparities in the studies and trying to identify where pretext stops may be happening, or consent only searches. That's another example of like a warrantless search, right? Or Of course, we're concerned in the context of immigration enforcement, we're concerned about what ICE agents and Border Patrol agents are doing without that justification for stopping people, right? When they use race or when they knock on doors without warrants, and when they're pulling in state and local law enforcement officers or turning people over to ICE officials or DHS officials, right? That is all part of the same kind of concern of warrantless stops or searches, detentions, seizures that are anathema to in a democracy, are anathema to this idea of our Fourth Amendment right to be free of searches and seizures without justification. So just wanting to ground some of our thinking about past, present, and future into the data it might connect to that relates to this fundamental right, this motivating principle of why we are all here together. Maybe that will help DOJ think about how to thread this emerging theme with relevant data and policy analysis, and threading what's been discussed as an interest in thinking about DHS activity in the state of California and how it relates to local and state policing, and also how we can think about progression, which was a really good point from board member Randolph, and what has improved, where do we still have gaps. The process itself should be underscored, like, and board member Randolph, I really appreciate you bringing that up, because for those of us who were there at the beginning, it was not a foregone conclusion that this would get off the ground. Any other thoughts you want to contribute to a discussion about theme or how to structure this? Does this like a good idea? Does this resonate with you? Past, present, and future, 10-year, look back and look ahead. Yeah, I'm seeing some thumbs up. Okay.
I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great idea, right? It helps to give validity and clarity to the work that's been going on and the work that still needs to be done. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you. Yeah. Do others feel the same? I'm taking silence as and thumbs up and smiles as communication. But if you want to put those gestures into words, that's always helpful. Okay. Well, seeing no other hands, why don't we turn to public comment and hear from the public about what we're discussing? So I invite members of the public to come forward to share their thoughts about what the 2027 board report should focus on and what theme it should include. And if you are a member of the public and you want to raise a hand, that would be great. You're also welcome to put something into the chat. All right, why don't we start with Karen Glover?
Hi, folks. My name is Karen Glover. I'm a professor at Cal State San Marcos. I'm a sociologist and criminologist, and I was first starting to attend RIPA meetings in 2017. So I've been here for a long time. Since COVID, I've attended almost every meeting, including subcommittee meetings. I'm going to say thank you for the work that you're doing. And I'm going to introduce something else that has to be noted. I'm compelled to talk about it. And I'm doing this not to put you in a tough spot, but I'm compelled to say it because I think it's the right thing to do. Last night in the gubernatorial debate, one of the RIPA members basically said that racial profiling was garbage. And I put the direct quote into the chat. It was published today in the New York Times, but anybody who watched the debate also was able to see it. And I'll leave it there. I find it discordant with the purpose of RIPA to have that be a ground for one of your members. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for raising that, Karen. I know it's come up in some of the committee hearings, and just so that the public is aware, that seat that Mr. Bianco, Sheriff Bianco holds is an appointment from the sheriffs. So it is up to the sheriffs to decide whether he properly represents them on this body or not. In the statute, there are seats held for different sectors, and that is one of the seats that is held statutorily for the sheriffs to determine. I see another hand from Michelle Wittig.
Good afternoon, board members. I think the themes that have been suggested are excellent for the 10-year anniversary of the launch of this board. The only maybe additional question that I would raise is for the immediate future, what evidence do we have that law enforcement agencies in the state of California are committed to reducing the racial and identity disparities that they are documenting? Is there a way to monitor the extent to which there is evidence that individual law enforcement agencies actually believe that there is a connection between the racial and identity disparities that they are showing exist in their agency are worthy of their effort to reduce by changes, for example, in pretext stop policies? We know that San Francisco and Los Angeles police departments have instituted such reforms. And it's likely that those reforms were instituted because they have a commitment to reducing the racial and identity disparities. But what about the other several hundred law enforcement agencies in the state of California? To what extent do we have evidence that there is such a commitment and that commitment has been reflected in actual policy reforms? I think that's worth a couple of paragraphs in the 2027 report. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public who would like to come forward? Again, you're welcome to raise a hand. You're also welcome to share something in the chat. You're also welcome to share something via email through the RIPA board website. If something occurs to you at a later time. Just give the public another minute to see if we have any further comment. Okay, seeing no further comment from the public. Our next agenda item is to discuss and vote on action items. I'm not sure that we have any items that we need to vote on, but well, I am corrected. Board member Angela Sierra, fellow sister board chair.
Not necessarily to vote on. I just wanted to kind of reflecting about before our break and sort of the comment I had made about discussing the subcommittee report readouts, during this section or this part of our agenda, the second half. And so I just wanted to put it out there that, as we're talking about the themes, and to me, it does seem like we have a general consensus of, the past, current, and future. But it seems to me what we're anticipating, or at least as I'm interpreting that, is the work of the subcommittees that was reported out really does fit into, those three buckets. And this is kind of our organizing principle. So, if there's any discussion about, I'm trying to think, is there anything that I had about the subcommittee reports? I know for me, like this idea about, using this new technology for, trying to analyze data, that was really important, a number of things. I mean, we had very substantive readouts. So I just wanted to at least convey that my interpretation of this is all of that work, it will be so far continue to be worked on in this kind of new organizational structure for the report.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for raising that. Yeah, in terms of where we go from here, I think we've given the Department of Justice guidance and input on an organizing principle, theme, past, present, future. And I think it will be their work to place the topics that we've mentioned into that structure, with the suggestions that we've made along the way, with perhaps an introductory section that talks about procedurally, like what we've put into place, which I think is not as which might not naturally fall into one of the subcommittee reports. That's sort of a preamble to the report. But yeah, for the Department of Justice to think about how to structure the data that is collected and pulled beyond the statutorily required data. What is the data or what is the data analysis that lends itself to a past, present, and future report that marks this 10th year.
Mm-hmm. And then just to follow up on that, with respect to the outlines that we received for before this meeting, my understanding is that all those will be discussed at subcommittee meetings, but and this may be more for DOJ staff. To the extent there are folks that aren't on those subcommittees that may have some reflections on those outlines, they can be discussed today, but they can, can they email DOJ with any reflections on those as well?
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think for ease of the public's reading, it would be great to think structurally about an outline that is past, present, future as subsections in the report sections, to the extent that that makes sense. The stop date is a stop data, so perhaps it doesn't make as much sense there. So I know the Department of Justice will be helping us schedule committee meetings. Our next gatherings will be in committee, and that's where we will start to implement this structure. And we are also I'm just noting that we are in April, and so this is a month that we receive the data from the 500 or so law enforcement agencies, and so it's just now coming in and will be used by the Department of Justice in the coming months to put together the report that within the structure that we've suggested. Board Member Kazi.
Yeah, I wanted to switch gears a little bit. I just looked at the agenda, and since we're nearing the end, I did want to take a moment to reflect on what was stated about Sheriff Bianco's statements, and also understanding our role. So I could wait till the next agenda item, or I could bring that up here since we're talking about action items. I'd leave that to you, Co-Chair Guerrero.
Yes, we don't have any action items per se. We've just wrapped a conversation to clarify the guidance that we're giving to DOJ, and noted that we'll be moving into subcommittees as our next step. So why don't we turn to the last agenda item, which is any other next steps that we should be considering. So Board Member Kazi, if you want to speak.
Sure.
To that.
Thank you for allowing that segue. I did want to. I did not hear about this, so this is my first time here. I guess it happened last night. You know, for me being on this board for 2 years, I know many have been much longer. It's a challenge, but I think we get through a lot of these conversations in a very way that is reflective on the communities we serve. But we all are taking time, and I think part of what brings me back is that even though we have a lot of diverse perspectives, is we have this goal of eliminating racial and identity profiling. It's there and we want to eliminate it. So to hear a comment like this from one of our board members underscoring what we all are taking our time out to do is really disturbing. And I understand that we cannot shift the appointment, but if there was a mechanism by which we could censure someone, or if we could, you know, issue a statement on behalf of the board or the board chairs to clarify, you know, this is our goal, and those of us who are on this board, we show up and we serve in this capacity to promote this goal. I mean, that would be enough for me. But if I was serving on any other board and we came together for a purpose, and one of our members was out there undermining that purpose, it would come up, and you know, we would figure out how to deal with it. So wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you. And you know, this issue, it has come up before since inception of RIPA board, regarding one or another of the board members. We have never gone beyond expressing dismay in our individual capacity, to the extent that there are mechanisms that we should consider. That might be a to-do for DOJ to guide us in what those options might be that we might consider. Board Member Randolph.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you, Chair Guerrero. I just want to make sure on the subcommittee reports, did we already cover that platform, or if we had some comments that we had about the subcommittee reports?
We did review them in the earlier part of the meeting, but if you wanted to provide feedback on those reports,
I just have one. It's just on one. Okay, so this is on the state and local policies subcommittee report, page 8, and it's going to be on the section C, the data collection and an analytics report. So we had talked about this is specifically on the Values Act. Remember, we had talked about the Values Act. So those of you who are not on the subcommittee report, we had talked about the Values Act in cooperation of law enforcement agencies, local law enforcement agencies with the federal government. And DOJ had said, basically, this board, we're looking to get that information. I had shared as a police chief, all law enforcement agencies must complete a Values Act form, which is a requirement by law. And that's done every year by law enforcement. They have to submit that information. Any transfers, that documentation is all provided to DOJ. That's going to be DOJ BCISS form 5854-2, reporting for Values Act. I had shared that and I asked DOJ if they could look into that. And they did look into that, and I appreciate that. And they came up with the solution to that, and it was that they cannot get that information. I think that information should be provided in this report here, that I spoke about it, because nothing I brought up here on the state and local policies section was put in there. But then also the DOJ follow-up, which they confirm that they can't get that information. So every law enforcement agency in the state of California, all 554 or whatnot, have to complete this form, whether you cooperate or not. That data is already there at DOJ. That was my argument. And it should be provided to this board, or at least to DOJ, the RIPA contingent, so they can provide it. But Joel did some research and said, hey, we can't get that information. So I'm disappointed my information was not put in here. But I'm just asking if DOJ can put Joel's follow-up that they can't provide that information. So, because I was speaking on behalf of experience. I fill that report out every year. That was number one. Number two, the same page we're talking about, which I really like. This is same page, same report. It's talking about Veritone. Okay. Just so you know, for everyone who's on this call, law enforcement agencies subscribe to a data collection service. They pay for it. Not all agencies, the big 11, the large sheriff's department, CHP, they have their own entity. They created their own program. They collect that data and they send it up. They have people that hand work on that data. They send it to DOJ. But the smaller agencies like myself, we pay for a vendor, and we have our officers use it. Some people could use the DOJ system, which is a little bit more complicated, but Veritone I use and I like it. However, I notice we're talking about Veritone here on page 8, right under subsection C. And it talks about Veritone introducing contract analysis. And I support Veritone. I think it's one of the best, but looking at the other entities that we use within the state of California, I don't think that was fair that Veritone's being identified in our report through DOJ. It shows that we're being biased. I just wanted to throw that out there and get that thrown out there. Veritone's a great system, but there's other systems that agencies are using throughout the state. That was all, ma'am. Thank you.
And just to clarify, Board Member Randolph, you're referring to mention in the subcommittee report. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, I am. That was it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Anything else in terms of next steps? Board Member Kazi.
Yeah, just to wrap up my prior comment. In terms of a next step, I do hope that DOJ staff can come back to us at our next meeting or whatever mechanism there is to recommend steps we can take in such a sort of situation. I'm using the word censure. There might be another way to talk about it, especially with respect to statutory law around notice requirements. Do we have to agendize something? Like, what sort of things do we have to offer some sort of due process? Like, I just don't know what that would look like. So if you all could come back to us with some recommendations, that would be helpful, I think.
Yes, I thank you for raising it, Board Member Kazi. And in that same spirit, I would also raise concerns about this particular board member's long absence. And so I don't know what that translates into, whether it is censure as you state, or whether it is a letter from us to the Sheriff's Association to express our dismay that they have a seat at this table, but they're not using it, and instead, that it is, we're potentially being undermined by the person who should hold that seat. But the long absence is notable. We have trouble meeting quorum, and that contributes. The absences contribute to that problem, to the functioning of this body. Board Member Armelin.
Yeah, I just want to say really quickly, just full support of Member Kazi and her comments. I think that it's especially important that we make this response timely. I don't think we should be waiting around to respond to this. Frankly, it just makes us look weak and out of touch. I don't think that's what any of us want. And I think if well, I actually have a question. I'm not even certain. Do we have other sheriff representation on the board now beyond that seat? So we have no way to even get a response from the sheriff's departments on their position on that seat, because that's frankly what I would have suggested immediately, is who's going to speak for this. But apparently there's no one to speak for it, which is also very telling.
Right.
So,
just,
and no need for a response to this, Andrea, because I know, we don't need to respond to my comment or anything. I don't want to take any more time with this. I just want to make it really clear to DOJ and other members of the board. I feel very strongly that this needs to be responded to immediately, not like in a month when we feel like this needs to be responded to in a timely manner.
right. So procedurally, board members are welcome to speak now, use their platform and their voice now. As a body, we need to understand the parameters of what we could do as a body, and then just a reminder that under the RIPA Act, there are specific seats that are held by the Sheriff's Association, the Police Chiefs Association, and so those are not appointments like many of us are appointees. But that is a designated seat, and so that is a potential avenue is for this body to express concern to the Sheriff's Association about that member. But I would also welcome DOJ staff if you have information now about what could be done, that could be helpful.
Thank you, Co-Chair Guerrero, and to the other board members. Excuse me, I apologize. I don't know that I have too much more to add to the comments. It is true that the determination of who sits on this board is by appointment by a number of different agencies, including the Sheriff's Association, PORAC, Police Chiefs Association, and others who are appointed by the state legislature. So those appointments are determined by those agencies and by those organizations. So we can certainly do research and provide some kind of framework about the capacity for the board to take action in really any capacity, in any interest that the board would like to do, with the understanding that the statute that has enacted RIPA controls the limits of what the board is looking at as a state agency. But we can certainly get back to you about that.
Yeah, and I mean, one thought is, again, I welcome board members to use their platform they have right now, as Board Member Kazi and Board Member Armelin have just done, to speak on this issue. But, another thought is, if this board thought in the interest of time something should be said sooner rather than later, then you could ask Angela and I as co-chairs to work with DOJ to understand and act on whatever available options there are. That's not ideal because it doesn't give us time to talk about what those options are, but I'm just putting that out there. So let's see, I see some hands up. So Board Member Ford.
I always think that silence is complicit, and I have not had an opportunity to watch the gubernatorial debate, but the statement in and of itself, I don't think stands in a vacuum. I'm not sure how you would explain that kind of a statement to be acceptable in any form or color. I think that it is necessary to have a level of response, especially from this group that gathers, especially from RIPA. I mean, I think that we represent something very significant as it pertains to these kinds of comments that are made publicly. And he's an officer of the law, which maybe for me makes it even a little bit scarier. So I think the moment necessitates a response.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Board Member Rawl?
Hi, I'm new to this, so I'm trying to get the reins and stuff. But I think that we should make a response as fast as possible. I feel like it's very disheartening that our colleague is going against something that we're actually actively working to try to fix and to show awareness to. And so I feel like we need to bring awareness to this situation and like figure out our next steps or what we could do as fast as possible so we don't look weak or so that we don't look like we support the what he may think about, but when we support stuff about like the RIPA Act and everything like that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Are there other board members who want to use their platform to speak? Board Member Randolph.
Thank you so much. And I'm glad everyone has brought, I'm glad you're allowing this platform. But one thing I did hear that everyone here has got jobs. I mean, everyone here is very busy. They're in school and they've got other obligations. So I tip my hat off to each and every one of you. I mean, I'm sitting here working right now. But one thing you did say is because of absence. And if there's going to be some type of action on this particular member, I sure hope DOJ hears this. That's all across the board, because there are members that have got a large amount of absences, and that is being tracked as well. So I just hope it's all across the board. I understand people have to miss meetings, they have families, they have jobs, but I sure hope we're going to do it all across the board. That was all. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, so I think we don't have a precedent. Not that we couldn't create one, but we don't have a precedent or like a working policy on questions about conduct or appearance here at the board. And we could develop something like that, but we don't have that currently, right? So what we do have in the right now is the platform of now to speak your mind. We invite people to continue to do that here. And if we think it's important to act as a body, then we could, have DOJ tell us what our options would be. But we would want to, because we are in an election season, because anything could be construed as weighing in on the election, we should be very thoughtful about how we proceed and make sure that that we are proceeding on principle or on our own policy of conduct. Board Member Wade.
While I could submit to the idea of not necessarily having a prescribed rule of conduct currently in place, is there not a presumption of conduct with this particular group? That when somebody operates directly contrary to the sentiment of the group and the overall trajectory of the group, or does it have to be a policy that is had been pre-implemented, or else it does not necessarily have teeth? So that for me, there's a tension between somebody who is a part of this group that operates as the antithesis to the values and the goals of the group. It would seem as though that there's already something embedded with the way in which this group acts and operates out of a maybe even an unverbalized expectation that holds some level of meaning and value that, while not on paper, still kind of is. And I know these days common sense ain't common, but I would still say that there's a level of expectation when you operate within a group, especially like this.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome any other individuals who want to, board members who want to use their platform. I'll just say that we always have to be careful about First Amendment and how that interplays with government bodies. And, under the First Amendment, government bodies can impose like a time, place, and manner restriction. That's where like we might have a policy, a code of conduct that that we could say at the front end, what would excuse or what would be cause for somebody to be excused. And so it's just it's a tricky situation right now because there is an election going on and we don't have nothing in the statute is providing any kind of time, place, or manner restrictions on conduct or speech. And so those are just some things for us to think about. There's nothing that restricts any of us from speaking right here, right now, or outside of this meeting on the conduct of another that we do not agree with. Angela.
Yes, I'm thinking, on this issue, it seems to me, as Robert brought up, there are a number of alternatives of how to approach this to the extent we have a board member who he feels like undermining, or maybe undermining our work or just not really engaged in our mission and the concerns about that. The responses run the gamut from individuals talking to or providing concerns to the Sheriff's Association regarding the designee, as you said, because they do have a seat at the table and it's an important seat at the table. But I think as a co-chair, or if we're going to do something as a body, if we decide to do something as a body, is it a letter or is it something akin to a censure? But I think all of that could be on the table for consideration. But I think would be helpful, as you had suggested, that perhaps us as the co-chairs could work with our DOJ staff as they are looking into what the lay of the land is and what the options are. So I think that may be a good approach. But again, folks have a forum now, as well as I don't believe there's anything prohibiting an individual in their own capacity, not as representing the board, to make their concerns known. To the Sheriff's Association or to whoever.
Right, correct. Board Member Kajabi.
Thank you. I just want to add that I feel that board members, we all need to come here in good faith. It's great that there's a variety of experiences and viewpoints on the board. But as was pointed out in the chat by a member of the public, the board members do take an oath. And although I don't have the wording of the oath directly in front of me, it speaks to the seriousness of engaging honestly and sincerely in this process. And then also that includes, attending the meetings. Of course, the meetings aren't always at times that everyone can attend. But if someone really has a track record of missing many, many meetings, then it's also effectively disenfranchising whatever constituency they were representing. So in this case, the sheriffs. And so I know those concerns that I'm raising are already implicit and explicit in all the comments that everyone here has raised. But I wanted to add that, to emphasize that. It's very troubling. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And so, you know, if members of this body have any specific proposals, thank you for expressing your concern, your dismay. I share all of it. I shared it, you know, before this election season started. I do want to keep in mind that as a government body, we need to be consistent about whatever we do. And so I want to be thoughtful. So if we're going to, you know, determine that a particular viewpoint is a violation of the oath, then we need to be consistent about that. If we determine that a number of absences is grounds for censure or action, then we need to be consistent about that. So if anyone has a specific recommendation, I welcome it. Board Member Kajabi, is that a new hand or an old hand? Old hand, okay.
Sorry, old hand, sorry.
I have a recommendation I'd like to make. Given what everyone said and Board Member Armelin saying, you know, as soon as possible, as we wait to hear from DOJ what we can do as a party, I would like to recommend and move, if that's necessary, that our co-chairs look into this issue and reach out to I'm sorry, what was it? The Sheriff's Department
Association.
Association, thank you. To not so much about the attendance, because if that's necessary, but I do understand that it needs to be done equally across the board, but at least to express our dismay and wonder, and you know, so I would like to empower our co-chairs to take whatever steps they feel are appropriate and necessary to address this issue.
Thank you. To the board, to the DOJ, I know that we've lost some folks, so I'm also wondering about quorum for any kind of vote like that.
Thank you, board members. Yes, you are correct that I think Member Randolph had jumped off, and so we do not have, even if it was a unanimous vote right now, that we would have the votes to move to approve a motion. But what we can do is, as I had said, is we can take a look at this and explain to the board the limits, the scope, the options that the board may have to address all of the issues that have been talked about, both in terms of attendance and in terms of some of the other comments. What's the board's, this is the scope of the board's response capacity.
Thank you. Yes.
If I can clarify, thank you, Alexander, for that. And just to clarify, if it is already within the co-chair's powers and authority to do so, I am saying you have my blessing as a board member to do that. So, you know, I just don't want us to come back in 3-4 months and saying, oh, we could have done this, because we already had the power and authority to do it. So you have my blessing as a board member to please go ahead and address this in whatever way you feel is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. We will assess with DOJ what that authority could entail. In the meantime, I'll encourage everyone, if they feel some kind of way about this particular topic, that you feel free to reach out to the Sheriff's Association. Feel free to speak up in public, as is your right. You have spoken up here in a public meeting, and that is much appreciated. I will just add to what has already been said that this particular board member has been making these kinds of comments since inception, since the beginning of his tenure here on this board. So, which has been long, his tenure has been long, and I anticipate that these kinds of comments will continue to be made. So I think it is good time for DOJ staff to explore what avenues the body has to take action, and which they said that they would already do. So with that, if there is nothing more, and I will last call for any comments around next steps from this board. Then I will move to, well, can't move. We will just adjourn because we don't have quorum any longer. Thank you for being here, hanging in. Thank you for your service. It's been said a few times, but this is taking us away from our work, from our other obligations. And so I think I speak for Angela and myself and say that we are grateful for your service here with us, alongside us on this board. And that's it. Have a good day, everyone. We'll give you back some of your time.
Thank you. Good to see everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, thank you.